one. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast. From Philadelphia to Los Angeles and everywhere in between. Filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio. It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Deven covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Nittany No Huddle Podcast. Once again, we are without Jordo, but Zach and I are going to do our best. Zach holds us together, so that's all that really matters. I know a couple people were commenting on Instagram, the post that I made, and our last video. So very, very quickly, we're going to hit the Maryland game. We're talking less than 5 minutes, about 2 minutes each. It's not a lot to say about a 30-0 blowout, but let's hit it very quickly. So Zach, sitting at home, seeing the game, what do you got?
I guess one of the things I'll hit on, we just talked about it a minute ago, is rare is the Penn State game, or really probably any game at this level, where you feel like after maybe one drive, or each team having one possession, where you're just like, this is not going to be a football game today. And maybe I overreacted, but even the very first drive, Maryland had the ball. So first off, their kid brought the kickoff out of the end zone when he definitely should not have. They end up with the ball at like the 10-yard line. We pressure Tua. We just harassed Tua on those first couple of plays. And if you were watching at home on TV, they sometimes zoom in on the quarterback. It just looked like he was not having a good day. And it just looked like his line was just never going to be able to protect for him. And they frankly never did the whole game. And he was running around for his life. And you could tell he was shell shocked. And I thought offensively, they didn't do a good job from a scheming standpoint of trying to help him out and running screen passes or something to try to help him out, because there just was way too many long developing pass plays where he just was getting killed. And then
the screen pass to the offensive lineman didn't work very well.
That one, yeah, I don't know if they drew that one up like that or what, but that was a great example of how you could just tell he was, and maybe part of it was carryover from the Wisconsin game too, where it just kind of like two really tough road games against physical teams that just frankly have guys at the line of scrimmage that Maryland really doesn't. And so I just think the poor kid never really stood a chance. And I think the other thing too is there were some opportunities I thought that he had to scramble and make some plays on the ground that I think in September he makes against us. And It just looked like he wanted no part of that. So I think he was kind of doomed to fail. But I guess the other thing I'll mention is we'd be remiss without talking about the Nick Singleton 2 4th and short touchdowns. And we've been talking about the power T all year. I love it. I love that we're starting to get, we started to use the sweep a lot, and then we started to show some counters off of that. And now we come back and we run the sweep and get 2 touchdowns from that. And it's such a cool thing to see. And I think it's a reminder for coaches that simple can work too. You can have a formation that you can have a couple things off of. And if you can run the base play well and you can run the counter off of it well, it's tough to defend if you give them multiple looks. And the last thing I'll mention is I feel like Singleton and Allen as true freshman running backs are getting stronger as the season goes on. And we talked earlier in the year, especially Jordan, who's not here to defend himself, but he complained about these guys not getting enough carries. And we all wanted to see them get the ball a lot. And Kevon Lee has just kind of disappeared. I know he's injured, but I think the way they manage the workload for these kids has helped get them to the point right now where they are not hitting the freshman wall. I think they're actually improving. Singleton, those runs, I mean, he's getting, a couple weeks ago, he's getting tackled on a lot of those runs. There was a couple plays he got into the secondary and just ran guys over, and he wasn't doing that earlier in the year. And so for me, it's really cool to see the maturation for him from earlier in the year where he was just kind of a speed guy to he's starting to look like a complete back. And I mean, a lot of ink has been spilled over these 2 freshmen, so I don't feel like we need to cover it too much, but it's really exciting to see not just how good they are, but the maturation that they've been on as they progress through the season, which you don't often see from true freshmen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that I hadn't really thought of being these true freshmen coming in, being super explosive right out of the gate. And it's so easy to hit that wall. In high school, you're probably only playing 10, if you're really good, 11 or 12 games. And it's definitely different than playing at a place like Penn State where you're getting, hit a lot by really good and big guys. So like you said, I think the fact that they're getting stronger, that's a really good point and really crucial for their development. The other thing with that is ball security in the rain. I mean, Northwestern Singleton fumbled it twice super early. Wasn't an issue this weekend, and I don't know on TV if he was even close to fumbling on some of those or anything, but it didn't feel like there was ever a doubt whenever they handed it off that it was going to be an issue. The other thing that I wanted to point out from my seat, and Zach, you might want to hit on this too, the defense was just incredible without JPJ, without Curtis Jacobs, a couple other guys banged up and didn't play a lot. I think that kind of played into Manny Diaz's game plan of bring the house every time, and these corners aren't going to need to be tested if Tualia doesn't have any time to throw it. But our defensive line, that was just a dominating performance. I mean, at halftime, Maryland had -6 yards. We were sitting right under one of those scoreboards that they have in the sections, and it was hilarious that Derek and I just kept trying to count, like, are we going to score more points than they're going to have yards? And it was until like late in the third quarter, whenever they finally had that one long drive down the sidelines where they had more yards than Penn State had points. And it was just every time it was like play 21, they're at 20 yards. Play 22, they're at -20 yards. Like it just flipped so quickly. And the defense was really impressive. So that's pretty much all I have on Maryland. It was cold. I was a little disappointed that the student section bailed so early, but they're the little brothers to the south. They are Maryland, and just the student section bailed pretty early. It was raining really hard for a couple stretches, so I guess I can't blame them too much, but I left a route about Maryland, so that was fun. So anything else about Maryland, Zach, or can we bury that tape too?
I guess the very last thing I'll say, and then we'll move on. And we talked about obviously Singleton and Allen. I think we also have to mention from the true freshman standpoint, I feel like Abdul Carter is just going
so
off.
special.
I think it was halfway through the game before I realized I haven't even heard them call Curtis Jacobs' name. I think, and that's not to say that Jacobs isn't playing well for us. It's just we're not missing a beat with Carter in there. And
right. Well, Jacobs didn't play on Saturday.
No, right. I'm saying it's almost like we didn't even miss him because Carter
I misunderstood
that guy. And the athleticism is obviously one thing, and that was apparent from the beginning. But it really seems like he's kind of developing that total package. He's not just a chase the ball or go after the quarterback guy. He's just making plays all over the field, and that's really, really exciting to see. And I mean, you were all over it as far as Manny Diaz defensively. It was really apparent we were just going to push them around up front, and that was great to see our defensive line just really dominate. And when you can do that, it's kind of hard to call any type of offensive plays and have any type of success if you're just getting beat that badly up front. And so I think it's like we always talk about, it all starts up front, and you don't have to have a great offensive line, but you need to be competent. And I think if they were just competent Saturday, Maryland would have been able to do things, because I think they have some players. In the preview, we recapped Roman Hemby's been having a good year, and
they didn't really. I felt like they didn't really use him, like you said. They kind of put Tualia in bad spots, and I think they could have ran the ball, or at least tried to run the ball a little bit more early. It felt like they threw on first down a lot. I don't have that stat in front of me, but it felt like it, and that put them behind the sticks. And then they tried to run on second down, and everyone just brought the house. So,
yep.
But the other thing I will say, since we're on true freshman, Drew Aller. Sean Clifford looked awful. But holy cow, Drew Aller didn't look much better. And
it's not a good day for quarterback play for anybody in Beaver Stadium. And
Sean Clifford looked really bad, man. I mean, in person, seeing his overthrows, there was the one to Parker Washington in the end zone, and I think the other one was Tinsley down the sideline. As soon as they hiked the ball, like, I smacked Derek, was like, this is a touchdown, because it was just a perfect route, especially on the Parker Washington one. It was an in and out, and the cornerback just bit so hard, and Clifford overthrew him by like 20 yards, and it wasn't even close.
The thing, and speaking of like overthrows in general, because I think the biggest inconsistency with him has always been the overthrow. Like,
yes. I
think back to some of like Christian Hackenberg and even McGloin at points, like when they missed, they were throwing dirt balls and just like bouncing at people's feet all the time. Right. Clifford's always missing high or on deep balls. What's really weird to me is he doesn't have great arm strength.
Right.
But it seems like he's often missing on overthrows on these deep balls. And so I don't know if it's like one of those things where he recognizes that he doesn't have elite arm strength, so he's always just kind of overcooking it on these deep passes, or
Yeah.
it just seems like every game there's a couple passes where, Washington or Tinsley, somebody will break open for a deep route and we'll have it, and it'll usually be an overthrow if we miss it.
Yeah.
And especially in today's day and age where like, almost in those type of one-on-ones, like you almost need to be intentionally underthrowing it because it's so easy to pick up a PI. So I don't know. Maybe somebody in the comments is like a QB guru or QB whisperer and can explain what's going on that leads, like mechanically, what it is that is leading to what seems like his misses are always long and on the deep passes especially. But
Yeah, he had several overthrows, not just the two that I'm thinking of specifically that I think probably should have been touchdowns, but that has been a problem for him. And it's not going to change at this point. There's 2 games left in this season and a bowl game, so it is what it is. And we're
Yep.
we're 8-2 and feeling pretty good. I feel pretty good after Saturday. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think that was a pretty good game, and I think that's a pretty good transition right into this crappy team, Rutgers, that we always have to play. That shouldn't even be in the Big Ten. Should still be somewhere else. Put them in the ACC, and they'll probably be successful because the ACC is garbage. I just wrote down a few general notes about Rutgers, and then I'll turn it over to you, Zach, to hit some of the player names. Obviously, without Jordo, we're trying to keep these a little shorter. Those of you who are loyal followers know that my internet is not the greatest. I'm the one who always is, and I'm the one uploading these videos now. So we're trying to keep them a little shorter, trying to get them out quick. Some things I wrote down. Rutgers started the year 3-0 with wins over Boston College, Wagner, and Temple. Very impressive. And then they went 1-6 is their current record. They're on a 3-game losing streak. The only win in that streak was a win over Indiana, 24-17, who Penn State just demolished 2 weeks ago. Last week they lost at Michigan State 21-20. Some of the things I read made it seem like they probably should have won that game. And maybe Zach, maybe you saw it. I haven't really watched it. Just tried to read a little bit. Like I said, being at the Penn State game, I didn't watch any football this weekend. But the little recap I read made it seem like Rutgers had a good chance, if not a great chance, to win that game. They're averaging about 144 rush yards per game and 164 pass yards. Pretty balanced, pretty even. They're right now -4 on turnovers. I think that'll be a key factor. Talk about turnovers. Penn State should force turnovers, should be dominating that offensive line again. They are only 31% on third down. And then a number that really stood out to me looking at the stats was offensively, they are 81% in the red zone. They're only scoring 81% of the time. And their defense is allowing scores 97% of the time. So if other teams are making it to the red zone, they're scoring. They've only given up, they're 28 for 29 is the number I saw. So Penn State's got to get to the red zone, and they are going to score, it seems like. So, Zach, I'll turn it over to you to hit on some more specifics. Maybe the big three, the quarterback, the running back, the wide receiver, and then maybe just a defensive guy or something. And if there's something else I saw, I'll chime in at appropriate times.
Yeah, so I'll start kind of big picture just briefly before hitting on some of the players. I think if you've watched any of Rutgers this year, outside of maybe the Ohio State game, you can see what Greg Schiano is starting to build, and I say build loosely because obviously it's really difficult if you're Rutgers in the Big Ten East right now, but it feels like Schiano is starting to kind of build a Big Ten roster, not one that's going to compete for Big Ten titles, obviously, but they're starting to get competent, and I think just from a defensive standpoint, if you look at the stats, that's borne out. Their rush defense, they're only giving up 134 yards on the ground this year, which is kind of right in the middle of the pack nationally, a little bit better than average. Their pass defense is actually tied for 22nd in terms of yards per game. They're only giving up 190 yards. So their total defense is 21st actually in the country, 324 or 325 yards per game. And part of that is they don't play fast on offense. They when they are doing well on offense, they're running the ball, trying to possess the ball. So they're playing a style that's not going to get themselves in shootouts. But I think first and foremost, if you're Schiano, you come in and you try to just say, we've got to be competent on defense. We can't be, Indiana or Ohio State's going to drop 50 on us, but we need to be able to play competent defensive football against a lot of these teams in the conference. So I think they're think they're starting to get to that point. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough offensive firepower, you're not going to keep up with the better teams in the league. And that's still kind of where they're at. It does seem like to me they've kind of settled the quarterback position a little bit in the last couple of weeks. They've played 3 guys at different parts of the year. Noah Vedral being the starter at the beginning of the year, and he went down with an injury. Gavin Wimsatt is the guy who's been playing a lot lately, and he actually had a really good first half against Michigan. If anybody watched that game or was following the score, I think Rutgers was actually up 17-14 at the half, and it looked like holy crap, is Rutgers going to give Michigan a game? And then the final score was like 52-17. But they did some nice things in the first half. Wimsatt's a pretty athletic guy. His passing skill and touch is definitely leaves something to be desired, but he's only completing less than 50% of his passes. But he's athletic. It seems like he's a guy that's been improving. If you look just at the Michigan State game last week, he was 20 of 34 for 236 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And, 21 points isn't anything to write home about, but they played a pretty good, solid game on the road at Michigan State, a game they definitely, to your point, Deven, could have won. Kyle Monagai has been the lead back lately. They had another guy, again, Samuel Brown, went down with injuries, but Monagai had 24 carries for 162 yards against Michigan State. And a few other guys that actually got a couple carries and were able to run the ball successfully. They had 225 total rushing yards at Michigan State. So, again, that's, 236 passing yards, 224 rushing yards. Michigan State isn't, the Michigan State of old, but that's pretty good. So I think at this time of the year, you start to see teams like Indiana a couple weeks ago, Maryland last week, where it kind of looks like they don't have anything to play for and they know it and it shows. And then there's other teams like for example, Penn State, where it would be really easy for a lot of these guys to say, hey, this season's all about Michigan and Ohio State, and we blew both of those opportunities. So we can just coast to the finish line. It definitely doesn't look like Penn State's coasting to the finish line. And just from the results of the Michigan and Michigan State games, I get the feeling that Rutgers isn't coasting to the finish line either. So I'm not putting Penn State on upset alert per se, but I think this is a game where you're not going to see the sort of lethargic effort that we saw from Maryland. I think these guys are going to show up. It's obviously on the road too, so that plays into it. But they have some players. I think with Wimsatt, again, with him being young and inexperienced, if Penn State can do from a defensive front standpoint what they did to Maryland, he's going to have a long day. But I think he's good enough if we don't get to him and if we don't make him uncomfortable, he can do some nice things.
He's a sophomore, right, Zach? Is that?
Yes. I'm not sure if it's one of those like COVID sophomores but he's
right.
listed as a sophomore.
Okay. Yeah, I think the fact that they kind of have settled in on a quarterback for whatever reason, regardless of Vedral getting injured and Simon, whatever's going on there. I think them settling on this quarterback, and I think, like you said, Wimsatt is super athletic. Looking at his numbers, looking at his ability, he's only going to get better. It's just playing in the Big Ten is really tough, and if you're not really good, it's really tough. And even if you're a solid, good player, it's tough. So I think he's probably going to face a similar situation that Tagovailoa was in because of the pressure that Diaz is going to bring. He knows you've got a quarterback that is not a pass-first quarterback. They're going to have the spies on him that they need, and they're going to make him uncomfortable, and I think that's going to be really important. And we'll see what happens with the running game with Monagai, and I'm really interested. I know you brought this up, and I don't. My computer froze for a second, so you might have said this and I didn't hear it. Did you talk about the wide receivers at all?
I didn't. I did not. I didn't mention or the tight end.
Right. So Aaron Cruikshank, their leading wide receiver, he does a little bit of everything for them. They run a lot of jet sweeps with him. They put him in different positions. He's right around 800 all-purpose yards this year, 362 receiving yards, a couple touchdowns. He's a guy to keep an eye out for how they use him. And then, Zach, I'll let you talk a little bit more about Johnny Langan. He's their second leading receiver, has quite a few rushing yards this year, has completed a couple passes over the last 3 years. What do you think about Johnny Langan?
Yeah, so I love this kid. If you recall, I think it was a couple years ago, may have been 2020, maybe even last year. I'm pretty sure he wears number 21, and they would bring him in sort of if Penn State fans can bear with me and recall the 2020 season. I know it's difficult, but
No, that didn't happen.
Yeah, when in those games where we would just run for like 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and it would be 4th and 1 on every drive, and we'd bring Will Levis in, and he would just bulldoze for like 2 yards. Johnny Langan sort of has that role, or has had that role for Rutgers at different points. And I mean, you were all over it. He's completed some passes this year. He has a passing touchdown. He also has 30 carries for 139 yards, which is awesome for a guy who is listed on the roster as a tight end.
Yeah.
And then he also has 26 catches for 251 yards. He's the number. He's actually got the second most complete receptions on the team. So it's a guy that does a little bit of everything. And I think, I don't care who you are, you got to respect that. That's really cool to see, because you don't really see that at this level. A guy that just buys into his role, and his role is a little bit of everything.
Yeah, so you'll really get a kick out of this, Zach. I pulled up his career stats because I have to read these career stats for you. Let me check his bio here real quickly. So in 2019, he started 8 games at quarterback. And there's a really cool picture of him on the Rutgers website of him wearing number 42 and throwing a pass, which is it's just awesome. It's really cool. So in his career, he has completed 98 for 184 passes for 1,043 yards, 8 touchdowns. Not great, but not terrible. I mean, 1,000 yards passing and 8 touchdowns. Rushing, he has 840 yards on 254 carries and 11 touchdowns. And then receiving, this year and last year, they moved him to tight end. He has 438 receiving yards with a touchdown on 46 catches. So he has 1,000 passing yards, almost 1,000 rushing yards, and 500 receiving yards for a kid listed as a tight end who was a quarterback, went to running back at number 42 for a little while, did all kinds of stuff. It's pretty wild. He's a kid that in this area, we like those type of kids. So, Zach, anything defensively that we need to be on the lookout for Rutgers? I know this Jennings kid is pretty decent. I don't really know a lot about him. I just have been seeing his name on some boards lately. He leads the team in tackles with 79, has about 5.5 TFLs. So I'm guessing he's a linebacker, but I haven't really looked at him because it's Rutgers. So.
Yeah, so he is a linebacker, and he's their leading tackler, like you said, with 75 tackles. I've got my eye on a couple defensive backs. Christian Izien is a name that some Penn State fans might recall. He's been with them for a couple years. He had a really good game at parts of the Michigan game that I had watched, and he's second on the team in tackles with 70. He's got 1.5 sacks. He's got 5 passes defended. He's got a bunch of tackles for loss as well for a defensive back. He's got 5 tackles for losses. So he's a kid that just kind of seems like he's everywhere, sort of like their version of Jair Brown, maybe. Avery Young, another defensive back. As Jordan likes to always point out, you don't like to see defensive backs being this high on the list of tackles, of team lead in tackles, but Izzy in second, Avery Young is third. Another kid that's definitely got a nose for the ball. I think, I started out, Max Melton is another. I think they've got a pretty good secondary. I talked about earlier how, just from a statistical standpoint, Rutgers has been pretty solid statistically in terms of defense. Tied for 22nd in the country just in passing yards per game. Again, that can be somewhat deceiving in terms of, like, is it just they're not giving up a lot of yards, but they're getting killed on the ground, or is it an efficiency thing? They're still ranked 48th in pass efficiency defense, so I think they're pretty solid against the pass. So it'll be interesting to see if Clifford or Aller or whoever's in there is able to have a pretty good game, or if some of those defensive backs are able to step up and make some things happen. But I go back to my overall feeling is that if you kind of take away, if you look at Rutgers' schedule this year and their results, you take away the Ohio State game, they've been pretty competent. They've played tough against the teams that you would expect them to have played tough against. So the question is Penn State in the category of, Michigan or Ohio State, where we've got enough firepower that we should put them away fairly convincingly, or do we allow them to muck it up the way Michigan State and Indiana and Nebraska and even Iowa? Gosh, I mean, if you watched any of the Rutgers-Iowa game, I think Iowa had 2 defensive touchdowns. That was a game Rutgers easily could have won. A lot of teams say that when they lose to Iowa, I guess, but I think they're showing signs of life just in terms of Shiano knows how to build a winner at Rutgers, or at least as much of a winner as you can be in the Big Ten East. So it's one where, again, I'm not sounding the alarm and putting Penn State on upset alert, but I think this is a team that's showing signs of life at a point in the season where a lot of teams, hint Maryland, aren't. So it might be the type of game where we see it a little bit closer than we'd like for a little bit longer than we'd like.
Zach, do you have in front of you, who do they play next week? Who was their last game?
They
Rutgers.
finish with Maryland.
Okay,
So Maryland and Rutgers have kind of become the end of the season rival for each other.
Right. So, this is a pretty big game for them because they can go in, beat Rutgers or beat Maryland and be bowl eligible. I mean, this is a pretty big game for them. And like you said, I think Rutgers plays that with some hype whenever they play Penn State. I mean, I remember the blackout and all that stuff that they've tried to try to build a rivalry with Penn State, but Penn State's unrivaled, so it's not really worth it. I just laugh every time I see that on the boards at the game on Saturday. But I'm with you. I mean, it's not going to feel like it whenever we give our score predictions, because I don't think that this is a game that Rutgers wins. I don't think this is a game that Rutgers is in. But like you said, I mean, I think that they have the pieces that could make it interesting, just like Maryland, whereas Maryland's had a really good secondary. So what did Penn State do? They pounded the rock. There's our first pound the rock of the night. I got to flash it on the bottom. I forgot. So, I mean, can we go into Piscataway and just run the ball, keep Clifford in check, and not throw it very many times? I think Penn State dominates if that's the case. If Rutgers does some different things defensively and forces Clifford to throw it 30 to 35 times, I will never think that's a good idea. So Rutgers could be in the game for sure. And with their good defensive backs, it definitely could be a game. That being said, I think that's time to give our predictions because we get accused sometimes of being doom and gloom. And I'm not doom and gloom. I think Penn State crushes them. So my score prediction, I'll go first. I don't usually go first. I'll go first. I have Penn State 34-6. I think it could be low scoring early, kind of like the Indiana game where maybe it's 7-6 at the end of the first quarter. Maybe it's 6-0 late into or mid of the second quarter, something like that. But I think Penn State just has too many weapons. They're just too good everywhere. I think that they are firmly showing me that they are the 10th best team in the nation. And I think that's a pretty good season. I feel pretty content because I really thought we were going to be 8-4 this year. And I feel pretty confident going into these last two games that we can take care of business and we're going to be 10-2. So I have 34-6 as my final score.
Yeah, I mean, to your comment about what your expectations were, I don't think any of us. Trying to think back to what Jordan's prediction.
I think he was 9-3, and we were both 8-4.
I'm trying to. Yeah, he had his weird one was I think he picked Minnesota to beat Penn State, but
Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio State, and Sparty.
Yeah, I had losses at Auburn, Michigan, and Ohio State, so I didn't. So coming into this game at 8-2 is better than what I expected. So
yeah.
It's really, we can get into that maybe at the end of the season in terms of looking back and what could have been or where we exceeded expectations. But yeah, I think coming down this home stretch, the Indiana game, well, even going back to the Ohio State game, which was a loss, but the way they played most of that game, obviously not the whole game, but then with the Indiana game where they showed up next week and just pummeled Indiana, complete domination of Maryland, you get the feeling that there's a chance that they parlay that into a complete domination of Rutgers and then hopefully a complete domination of Michigan State. I think it's going to be a game where Penn State fairly well dominates, but sort of like the Maryland game, the score isn't going to be anything crazy. I'm gonna go something like 31-10. Rutgers scores late to maybe keep it a little bit closer than it looks. But I think the lack of a really competent passing game is going to hamper Rutgers because you're just going to see Manny Diaz unleash the hounds, and it's just going to make life miserable for Wimsatt. I think he might have a little bit more success than Tagovailoa, but it's still going to be tough for him.
Yeah. And I will say from being at the game, and you probably saw this on TV too on Saturday, I think Penn State could have really ran that up on them. I think being in the rain, they got some people out really, really early. And obviously with JPJ and Jacobs, The offensive line is still complete patchwork right now. I think that game really could have been more like 45-0 rather than 30-0. Just from the feel of when they started subbing pretty hard, which was kind of weird because Franklin, I mean, I guess maybe that's that maturity thing that we've talked about this year, as Franklin seems to be maturing, which is always good. I mean, I would run it up on Maryland if I was the coach, and that's why I get it run up on me in basketball sometimes. So it happens. It is what it is. But I get what you're saying, and I just, if this is a game, I will be surprised. I really will, because I think Penn State's just playing really well right now, and I know Rutgers' scores are admirable or whatever word you want to use. I just don't think they're good enough, and it's Penn State Rutgers, so
It shouldn't be close. I mean, that's the if it's closer than we expect, then that's not a good sign, because I think we've seen a trajectory the last couple of weeks, and that trajectory, the trend that's been set, is this is going to be another one. And as much as we're trying to pump up Rutgers, and I think give them some credit for some of the good things they've been doing, there's still a lot of bad in that equation as well. And again, I'll put it this way: you look at their schedule and you say, oh, that's they should have beat Iowa, should have beat Nebraska, beat Indiana, played Michigan State really tough. But you also see blown out by Ohio State, blown out by Michigan. If you're Penn State, you want to be in that latter category, where your Rutgers score looks like the scores that Michigan and Ohio State has with them instead of everybody else. That's maybe the simplest way to put it.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I hopefully that's what happens, and I think it will. So I think that's a good place to transition here. I had it on the bottom line that Penn State, in the latest rankings, we actually are recording after the college football playoff rankings come out this week. We're a little later into the week. They're ranked number 11. I think that makes sense. And when you see our top 10s and 25s for me and Zach, I think you'll see that we're kind of in the same boat. So I'll go over Jordan's really quick. Maybe I just skip it. I don't know. So Jordan has Michigan at 1, Georgia at 2, TCU at 3, Ohio State at 4, Tennessee at 5. I'm on board. I'm all cool with it. I think I have the same top 5 except for Georgia and Michigan. Then it gets really interesting because Jordan has Penn State at number 6. Then he has USC at 7, LSU at 8, Oregon at 9, and Clemson at 10. Again, I think all the other 4 kind of make sense. Jordan's reasoning from his text message to our group was that if USC or LSU or Oregon or anybody else played the same schedule Penn State had, they would have the exact same record. I can't really say that I disagree completely. Like you look at Clemson, they would be lucky to be 8-2 with Penn State's record, I think. So I guess I can't completely fault him, but Penn State at 6 is a little crazy, don't you think, Zach?
Yeah, I think it's easy to say, look at all these teams that would also be 8-2 with our schedule. And I think that's fair. I mean, because I think we think Michigan and Ohio State are pretty good. But the flip side is I think a lot of teams would be 8-2 with our schedule. Not a lot of teams, but I think a lot of those teams, even further down the rankings than Jordan would care to admit, would be 8-2 with our schedule.
Bama.
Because who are they gonna lose to? Are they gonna lose to Purdue? Are they gonna lose to Auburn? Are they going to lose to? So I think Penn State schedule is one of those things where a lot of the teams that were expected to make our schedule. I mean, I think coming into this year, we looked at the schedule and thought this is going to be tough. Open the year on the road with Purdue, who might win the West, and who actually might win the West. And game 3 at Auburn, Minnesota with a really veteran team.
Ohio's going to win the MAC. I mean, obviously that's not. I'm not putting them on that level, but I'm saying that's a really solid. Very low major
for
team.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's just some of these other teams, it didn't really materialize. So it's just one of those things where, yeah, you can say we're of all the 8-2 teams, we have the best losses of the 8-2 teams, but
we have no wins.
But we haven't beaten anybody. And if you look at Bama, as much as Jordan would not want to admit, they've got a pretty solid road Ole Miss win.
I'm going to put your top 25 up, Zach, and let you go right into it.
Yeah, I can just move right into it.
So I think here anyway. So,
I think it's aggressive, and I don't disagree necessarily with his position that Penn State's playing really well. And I think if we played some of these teams, we could hang with them and maybe even beat some of them. But at the same time, I think the resumes do matter. So I'll move right into mine. I've got Georgia number 1. I do have Michigan number 2. I think, again, I don't think they've really played anybody, but I think they've dominated everybody, which is a crucial factor for me. Is whether the committee calls it game control or whatever you want to call it, they've just largely had their way with everybody they've played. I've got TCU at number 3. I just keep waiting for them to fall off, and they just keep winning. And I got to give them credit because I think the Big 12 is pretty solid this year. So to just keep winning is a good thing in that conference. I've got Ohio State at number 4, probably a little bit lower than most folks do. I just think they haven't really shown anything, and they haven't quite dominated to the degree that Michigan has. I've got Tennessee at 5. I think a lot of people have them there. I've got USC at 6. I don't feel great about that because I think defensively they're a bit fraudulent. We're going to find out this weekend. They obviously have a big matchup with UCLA coming out. I've got LSU at 7. Same thing as USC. I don't really believe in them, but they beat Bama, so they have to be up there in the mix. They did not look good at Arkansas. They should have lost to Arkansas last week. I think if KJ Jefferson is healthy and Arkansas isn't playing their second and then third string quarterbacks, they beat LSU.
A really bad Arkansas team, by the way.
A horrible Arkansas team based on one of our colleagues. But in any event, they won and they survived, which is at this time of year sometimes all you have to do. I've got Utah at 8. I think they've just been humming along. They had some early season struggles, lost to Florida out of the gate, kind of got spanked by UCLA a little bit, but then they really kind of dug in and straightened things out. And they have that big win over USC, which might come in really handy at the end of the year. They're probably out of the playoff mix, but they're definitely right there in terms of winning the Pac-12. It's all right in front of them. They have a huge game with Oregon coming up. I've got Alabama at 9. Again, I don't feel great about it. I think they've been really vulnerable in way too many games this year. I've never remembered. I mean, they obviously have 2 losses, which that alone doesn't happen in the regular season for Bama. But even beyond the record, they've been really vulnerable in like 5 or 6 games this year where they've looked like they either look like they should have lost or could have easily lost, which normally
like Saturday.
You can't say, yeah. Same thing with Ole Miss game. I mean, Ole Miss, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're probably walking away from that game saying, we had them. We should have beat them. And normally Bama, in a normal Alabama season, they have one game where somebody knocks them off or somebody like had them on the ropes.
Close.
And there's been 4 or 5 this year where they were on the ropes or should have lost. And that leads me to number 10, Penn State. I think we're right there in the mix with a couple other 2-loss teams. Washington, Oregon, Ole Miss are kind of in the mix. I have no respect for the ACC whatsoever, so I don't even have Clemson or UNC in the mix. I would have those Pac-12 teams right after Penn State. But I think, again, really good losses, and we've been largely lately anyway dominating the teams on our schedule that we should be dominating, which Oregon and Washington really haven't. Again, Oregon has that all of a sudden once Oregon takes that second loss, the absolute beatdown that they have from Georgia starts to look a little worse, right? I think when that was the only blip on the radar, it was like, they're beating everybody in the Pac-12. It's one game. And then they go and lose to Washington at home. And again, Washington's not a bad team, but if you're Oregon and everything was set up in front of them, they were number 6 in the college committee's rankings, so they had the playoff in front of them. You can't lose to Washington at home, especially in the manner in which they did. They look like Jordan on Madden or something, like going for it on their own 30 with 2 minutes to go, and craziness. So that's my top 10.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to keep going. So here's my top 10. I have Georgia at 1, Michigan at 2, TCU at 3, Ohio State at 4, Tennessee at 5. So I have the exact same as my colleague here, Zach. Then I have LSU up to 6. I don't know. I hate the SEC, but I have 4 SEC teams in my top 9, which is really doesn't make me feel good at night. But I think LSU is really good. I think Tennessee is really good. I think Georgia is really good. I think Alabama is still solid. So I have them all in the top 9. I have Utah at 7. I think I'm with you that they just kind of keep floating under the radar. They're just kind of there. Nobody's really talking about them, but nobody's like not talking about them, if that makes sense. They're just there. So they win the Pac-12. They can make things some kind of interesting, even though they have 2 losses. That Florida loss, they have to be kicking themselves about that Florida loss because, I mean, they're probably they might be top 5. They're at least 6.
They're at least Tennessee. 6, I bet. I bet you they're right behind Tennessee if they have that Florida win.
Right, because I think those are the top 5 best teams in the nation. Even TCU, that I still don't know if TCU is good, but I think Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and Tennessee are 4 legit teams. Then I have USC at 8, Bama at 9. I have Oregon down to 10. I wanted to drop them farther. I really did. I don't know. Like this year isn't as crazy as like 07 or whatever, but it's weird, and there are some weird things happening. I still think Oregon solid. Bo Nix still played pretty well. It's still 19 of 30 or whatever it was with 2 touchdowns, no picks. I still think he's a front runner for the Heisman. I would have him in my top 2 or 3 at the absolute lowest. And then I have Penn State at 11 because I think they are one of the better 2-loss teams. They're just right on the outside. So the only other one I want to point out, 19, I have Coastal Carolina. Just want to send a quick shout out to Virginia and their fans and their students dealing with a lot, and they're in our thoughts. Obviously, their game against Coastal Carolina this week got canceled because of the shooting. So just wanted to let them know that we're thinking about them. That's a really terrible situation, and it sucks anytime stuff like that happens. So Coastal Carolina, maybe they'll find a game or something, but
it definitely stinks for, obviously there's more important things in football, but kind of stinks for Coastal Carolina because I don't think they had a chance to play their way into the group of 5 champion role and get the Cotton Bowl, but not having this game really deprives them of an opportunity to maybe, go in and have a huge win over an ACC school, and maybe UCF and Cincinnati and Tulane slip up down the stretch and Coastal Carolina slips in, but you get it. There's some things are just more important than football.
Right. So didn't mean to put that on a somber note. Just wanted to let them know because I know we have some Virginia fans and people watch from all over because we're just Nittany No Huddle Nation here. So that'll do it for our top 25 segment. Let us know why Jordan is right that Penn State should be number 6. Make sure you like and comment and tell us why. And now for everybody's favorite. No, he's right. We're the wrong ones. We are. So now for everybody's favorite time of the day, which is our pick'ems. Last week was not good. Once again, was not good. So Jordan won the week at 4-4. He went 500 for the week with his picks in the comments. Once again, we didn't get his picks, but I will add them to the comments tomorrow whenever he wakes up and sends them to the group chat. Here are our current standings. Zach is now hovering above 500 after seemingly having this under control. He is now 38-37, only 2 games up on Jordo, and I'm still hanging on. I feel like I'm way out of it, and I'm really one good week from being right in the mix of things. So Derek last week went 3-5. Again, appreciate him coming on the podcast. We had a good time on Saturday. Make sure you go to Instagram, follow us on Instagram. I posted a bunch of pics and videos and stuff from us being good. Like we didn't drink or anything. It was really nice. So we just enjoyed the game. He was very disappointed that he was 3-5 last week. He really thought he was going to be 6-2. So he's now tied for second on our college game day guest picker standings. No guest picker this week. We're trying to get somebody pretty cool lined up for next week. Hopefully that works out. I sent a couple messages today that I'm kind of keeping my fingers crossed for that I think could work out for them coming on. Just got to find the right time during the week. We'll see how it works. But for now, Zach, I'll turn it over to you. Let's get into it. We should not spend a ton of time on this because it's just me and you. So
yep,
let's go.
All right. Well, seems like every week we always have a couple Big 12 games because everybody's decent. So we'll start out with a Big 12 game. Number 4, TCU in a rivalry game at Baylor. And just for what it's worth, TCU is only favored by 2.5 points in this road matchup. I'll go first. I am taking Baylor.
Whoa.
I consistently keep saying at some point this TCU magic is gonna wear off and Cinderella's gonna have to leave the ball, and Baylor is one of those Big 12 teams that's just been like pretty solid all year, and it hasn't been great, hasn't been bad, and I feel like they're due for like the 1 week where it kind of all goes together. And TCU's just, again, I'm not saying they're a fluke. I'm not saying it's been lucky. It's just everything's just been working out. There's going to have to be a week where maybe it doesn't. And so I'm going Baylor.
Yeah. Thank you. Cause I'm going TCU. I think that they find a way. I agree with you. I think the Big 12 is deep and weird things are happening. But I think TCU finds a way. I do. I think they find a way. So we'll go there.
I like it. And I think the Texas game was indicative of them winning in a different way because they've kind of been winning high scoring matchups and then all of a sudden they beat Texas 17-10. And I think the only touchdown Texas scored was actually defensive, was a like fumble return for a touchdown.
Right,
so.
Fumble 6.
But moving on, kind of a crappy ACC game, but the ACC doesn't give us a lot to work with. We've got Duke, who is actually surprisingly 7-3 this year and second.
Got some votes in the AP this week.
Yep. And second in I think it's the Coastal Division, the non-Clemson division of the ACC. They are playing at Pittsburgh, and who's 6-4 and who's been really up and down this year. Pitt is favored by 7.5, which was really surprising. I think if I hadn't included this one, this would have been a really nice super dog target for both of us. But I'm going Duke. I think they've had a really nice year. They've been pretty solid. They've won a bunch of games and they've played tough in their losses. And I think Pitt's just been really up and down. And I don't think there's much of a home field advantage there. So I'm going Duke.
Yeah, I'm going to go Duke as well. I actually tried to be smart this week and just make my picks, not try to play any games, try to get back into this thing. I don't think Duke is very good, but I think Pitt is worse. So I'm going to go with Duke.
I like it. Well, here's one I think you may like. Texas Longhorns at the Kansas Jayhawks. Who do you got? And Texas is getting 9 points for whatever reason at a Kansas team that's been pretty competent this year at home.
You already know. It's horns down. I can't do it. I can't do it. I just can't.
And that loss to TCU, I mean, that's one of those, we talked about it a little bit with Penn State preview, is you're 6-4. It would be really easy for Texas to just pack it in.
Yep. I think it happens.
Yeah. I'm going Texas. I think so. Kansas won at Texas last year. It was their first Big 12 win in like forever. And so I'm just hoping that the team is like, stewing after that. And then they use that as a reason to show up. So I don't feel good about it. I wish I could go horns down, but I'm picking Texas in this one.
I'll always go horns down. That's one that every week I'll just accept the loss if I have to.
Yeah, it could be like Texas at the Blind Sisters of the Poor. And
you know what's funny? I don't even
Blind Sisters.
Texas. Like if I was ranking my most hated college football teams, like Texas would probably be like 10th or 11th. Like they wouldn't even be in the top 5. But it's just fun to say horns down because
I loved them in like the Colt McCoy era, and I think
everybody Colt McCoy.
I think everybody did. They were cool, and Mac Brown was like this like cool old like grandfatherly coach. Yeah, and then they fired him, and it's just been a revolving door of like annoying coaches that nobody likes.
And I think the fact that every year they're like preseason ranked top 10 and they're all like, oh, this is the year. And then they lose their second game of the year and they fall out of the top 25 and they never get back in. It's just kind of annoying. I
think everybody's just kind of tired of it. And so anyway, we'll throw a Big Ten game into the mix. This one's actually kind of a big deal as far as the Big Ten West race goes, which is nothing more than who gets to get slaughtered in Indianapolis by Ohio State or Michigan. But we've got Iowa at Minnesota, and Minnesota is actually favored by 2.5. Who do you got?
I have Minnesota very, very close. I think they are just competent enough on offense that their defense can stop Iowa from scoring because Iowa's offense is terrible. So I think Minnesota wins 6-3.
I like it. It's going to be an ugly game to watch. So
I'm not watching it.
Viewer discretion is advised. I think Iowa wins. I didn't see if Tanner Morgan is done for the year or what the story is, but I know that Kiliamanik or whatever his name was, he started the last couple of weeks. I worry because we've talked about it every week on the podcast. Iowa's defense is legit, not just in comparison to their crappy offense. They're really good. So I think if Minnesota can't get a passing game going, Mo Ibrahim has been really, really good. And I think he actually just set like a Big Ten record or something last week. He had like 18 straight 100-yard rushing games or whatever.
I think Ezekiel Elliott had 17. So
he's been great. And Trey Potts, I mean, they have a really good running game, but I think Iowa's good enough that if they can't get a passing game going, Iowa's good enough to stop the run. I'm with you. I think it's going to be like 5-4, something ridiculous, and 11
That'd
to 10.
Be awesome.
It's going to be low scoring, and I just worry, Iowa's going to do their classic, like get a pick six or a special teams touchdown.
True.
I'm going Iowa. Don't feel great about it. I think, if Iowa wins this game, they basically are in the driver's seat for the West, which is, it's kind of ridiculous to think about Iowa playing in a conference title game. It also is ridiculous to think about Purdue playing in a title game, and they're actually the two odds-on favorites in the West right now. So I'm going Iowa. You're going Minnesota. It's going to be an ugly game. Nobody should be watching it.
Nope. Not even Iowa or Minnesota fans.
Couple better games later in the day, and we were kind of doing them in chronological order. We've got number 14 Ole Miss at unranked Arkansas. The same Arkansas team that just gave LSU all kinds of fits. Ole Miss is only getting 2.5 points on the road at Arkansas. I'll go first in this one, and I'm sure Deven will be thrilled with it. I'm going Arkansas. I think Ole Miss is kind of, they're going to be that classic home loss to Bama that was really close that they should have had, and they go on the road and lay an egg, and it's tough to get up for a 5-5 Arkansas team that, contrary to what some of the folks on this podcast might think, has actually not been that bad this year. They've not been great by any stretch, but they've been playing everybody mostly pretty tough. And again, if you watched that LSU game last week, they should have beat LSU. So, Woo Pigs, I'm going Arkansas.
And I'm going powder blue helmets. So I'm going Ole Miss. The Fighting Lane Kiffins fight back. I think it's the exact opposite of what you said. I think they should have beat Alabama, and they come in and they say, you know what, we're taking it out on Arkansas tonight. And I think they take care of them. I really do. And I agree. Arkansas is not nearly as bad as Jordan wants us all to think. But I think Ole Miss really comes ready to play. So we're just going to keep going opposites. I got Ole Miss.
And if you're a Penn State fan, this might be one to tune into, just because I think if I was a betting man right now, the most likely bowl matchup is going to be Penn State Ole Miss in the Citrus Bowl. So if for another reason, then check out Ole Miss. And Deven mentioned the helmets. I think they've got some of the best uniforms in college football.
Yep.
Super underrated. Nobody talks about them.
Agreed. I love them.
Another big, fairly big matchup. Not any national title.
That doesn't make any sense. Also, this one you're about to talk about makes no sense.
Yeah. So we've got number 22 Oklahoma State that seems to have steadied the ship at Oklahoma, who just lost to West Virginia, and Oklahoma is getting 7.5 points. I'm going Oklahoma State. I'm assuming Devin's going Cowboys as well.
Yeah. Oklahoma's terrible.
I don't see where Oklahoma, I don't know how they're favored at all. And if they were to be favored, you'd think it'd be by like a point or two or something.
Right. Right, because Oklahoma State is not playing well right now.
Yeah, they've lost.
Oklahoma is playing worse, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't see it. I think it's Oklahoma State. I think they win, not necessarily a blowout, but I feel pretty confident that they win and they do so handily. So I'm sure, because we both picked the Cowboys, that Oklahoma is probably going to win. But
Jordan will pick Oklahoma, and he'll steal a game there.
Yep. So, all right. Well, the last two games we got are probably the two biggest games of the week. And if you're a Pac-12, if you're George Kliavanoff or whatever his name is, the Pac-12 commissioner, you had to be thinking last week, man, how great is this? We're going to be going into next week. USC at UCLA. They're both going to have one loss as long as they beat a couple garbage teams last Saturday. And then Utah is going to be going into Oregon, who's going to be number 6 with one loss. And then, boom, Oregon loses at home to Washington, and UCLA takes an ugly, ugly, ugly home loss to Arizona. And all of a sudden, these games are still important because all 4 of those teams still have the Rose Bowl in their sights. But all of a sudden, outside of USC, there's no national title implications. Right. And even USC, depending on who you ask, needs some help.
They need help. Yeah.
But they're still alive. So the first one will go number 7 USC playing at the Rose Bowl at number 16 UCLA. USC is only favored by 2.5 points. I'll let you go first on this one.
I've got USC. I've always kind of been partial to USC, and I think that they are still doing some really good things. Addison, that transfer from Pitt, I mean, he put up a lot of good numbers. I think that they have a lot of weapons that they can use that UCLA doesn't quite have, and DTR did not look good last week. I don't know if he'll be in a funk, or maybe he'll do the Ole Miss thing that I was saying, and maybe they'll come back and they'll just take it out on USC. But I think USC wins, and I think they put themselves in the conversation for the college football playoff because of how they win. I'm not saying they go out and win by 30 or something, but I think that they are in control, and they are in control the whole game. And I think people will start being like, maybe USC is better than we thought.
I like it. Well, we've got too many games that are split that I think I need to stick with it and try to balance it out. And I'm actually going to go UCLA here. I think for two reasons. One, it seems like the Pac-12 is just destined to cannibalize itself every year and keep themselves out of the playoffs. And number two, I think, again, UCLA lost to Arizona. It's really hard for me to sit here and justify why they're still a good team after that. But I think they do things that match up well with USC. So USC, their offense, UCLA is not going to stop them. USC is going to score a bunch of points. What you got to do is keep Caleb Williams on the sideline. And the one thing that UCLA can do is run the ball. And Zach Charbonnet, kind of a forgotten name. People forget he started out at Michigan and was pretty solid. He's had a really good year. I think he's got like 1,100 rushing yards. I think if UCLA can really pound the rock, there's another pound the rock reference, and run the ball. And again, you can't go in thinking we're gonna get in a shootout and outscore Caleb Williams. I think you got to go in thinking keep him on the sideline and just possess the ball. The only games where USC has been challenged this year, Utah kind of beat him in a shootout, but the other game was Oregon State where they only won 17-14. And I think Oregon State did exactly what, if I was Chip Kelly, I would do on Saturday, except UCLA has a bit more talent than Oregon State has. Right. So I think they could make it happen. I don't feel great about it, but I'm rolling UCLA.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad pick by any stretch. I mean,
yeah, and like
it's not me throwing out Kentucky over Tennessee.
As good as USC is offensively, there's no denying they haven't been great defensively this year. They've given up points to a lot of teams. Cal, even Cal a couple weeks ago, Arizona State, people score on USC. It's just their offense has been so good that it's hard to keep up. But we'll stick in the Pac-12 for our final game, and this one would have been a huge game, but for that Washington upset. Number 10 Utah going into Eugene at number 12 Oregon. Oregon is favored by 3. I'll go first. I like Utah. I think they've just been rolling. I think Oregon, again, it's a lot this time of year. It's all about sort of like emotions and the ability to what do you still have to play for and how do you respond? And I think that loss and the way they lost, that has to be one of those losses that just stick with you. And I think Utah is they're just humming along right now. So I'm going Utah.
Man, I wrote down Oregon. I'm on the Bo Nix train. Even whenever he didn't play great last week, I think he still played solid, did a lot of good things. I just don't know if I trust Utah's quarterback. What's his name? Rising, I think is his name.
Cam Rising, yep.
Yeah, I just don't know if I trust that he is good enough to win this game. And I think what it's going to come down to is which quarterback plays better. And I hate to say that because that's what gets all the hype on ESPN and Fox and all these. It's quarterback versus quarterback when it's 11 versus 11. But I really think that this game is going to come down to which quarterback can play up to a national championship level. And I've seen more from Bo Nix than I have from Cam Rising this year. So I think Oregon wins, but I think it is a dogfight. It might come down to a 2-point conversion the same way Utah beat USC. It really could to me because I think it's going to be that close.
Yeah, it definitely should be the game of the week. There's just a lot of
on paper for sure.
Not a lot of great games this week, but I think we've got by my count 1, 2, 3, 4,
6 out of 8. I think are different.
6 of the 8 games we went differently. So either you're going to be right back in it. I'm going to be
because I'm down by 6 games. So
yeah, or maybe it just we split and some of my wild picks work out and some of them don't, and then it just kind of comes out in the wash. But if nothing else, it'll give Jordan something to chew on because he won't be able to just look at like 8 games where we went the same way and he can try to get on like 2 for 1. So
yeah, and we'll try. We did last week. He made his picks without seeing our picks, so we're gonna hope that he can do that again. But you just
we'll keep him on the auto
with him, but you never know. So, all right, Zach. I have to let you do Super Dog first because I'm just the Super Dog master. So
yeah, and I had one that I had mentioned, but I'm actually going to go a little bit off the grid here, and I am going with, if I can pull it up real quickly, I'm going with Wyoming at home in what is actually a really big matchup.
I wrote that one down. I swear, wrote it down.
Boise has really figured things out. They fired their offensive coordinator early in the season, and the quarterback left because of it. But they figured things out. But Wyoming is 7-3, 5-1 in the Mountain West. They're in the same division as Boise, who's 6-0. If they win this game, they pretty much win their division. And somehow Boise is getting 14 points on the road. I'm not necessarily calling Wyoming to win, but I think they easily cover, and I would not be shocked if they actually win outright.
I'm with you. So that was one that I wrote down because I'm on such a hot streak right now. So for all of our fans, if you want to win some money, I'm never mind. I'm going to take that back. But the way it's going, I'm pretty sure, and Zach, you probably remember too. I think I've won 6 straight Super Dogs, and 5 out of the 6 are outright winners, or is it 6 out of 7?
I'm not sure. We'd have to go back, but it's been.
I think
quite
it's
a
definitely
streak.
5 out of 6, but it might be 6 out of 7. And I'm on fire right now, and I don't really have any reason for it because I suck at our pick'ems. So, Wyoming, Boise is one I wrote down. Another one I wrote down was Western Kentucky getting 5.5 at Auburn. I feel it. I feel like Western Kentucky is going to win that game. And they're going to go into SEC Nation, go into the hardest stadium in college football to play, and they're going to pull out a win. I feel that one. I wrote down this will catch you off guard a little bit, Zach. I wrote down Virginia Tech plus 10 over Liberty, who is 8-2. But I think Liberty is going to be reeling after losing to who is my actual super dog. So Virginia Tech, who is absolutely terrible, but they're getting 10 points at Liberty. They've got to find a way to cover, I think. But my super dog, the UConn Huskies, are bowl eligible under Jim Mora. Going independent worked out great for them. They did not have a football team 2 seasons ago with COVID, canceled the whole season. They had lost 24 out of 25 or something like that. And now they're going to a bowl game. And they're getting 10 points at Army. I think UConn covers and UConn wins. And they are 7-5 and get into a bowl game. And Jim Mora takes them to a bowl game victory. That's my bold prediction. So if you need some money lines for me to give you some advice on, I got Virginia Tech. I got Western Kentucky. Zach and I both have Wyoming. And I have UConn winning outright over Army and just running the table. They're just doing a great job. I almost put them 25th in my ranking because it's not like it really matters. Like our rankings mean nothing to anybody except for us. So I almost put UConn in it. Just why not? So that's my super dog. We'll see if we can keep our streak going. Yeah, I don't know. I'm so cocky right now. Like I feel so confident because I've never been good at this, and I'm just on fire.
So if you take Devin's advice and you lose money this weekend, please be sure to let us know in the comment section.
Yeah, but more importantly,
or if you win money, let us know too.
Yeah, more importantly, when, not if, when you win money, let me know and I'll send you my Venmo, and you can split it a little bit with me. So that's your Nittany No Huddle lock of the week. UConn over Army. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there now.
I like it.
All right. So I think that pretty much covers it, right? That's the
I
stuff
think so.
we usually talk about. We're really missing Jordo. He's our host, and I don't really like doing this as the host, but it is what it is. Saturday's game is at 3:30 on Big Ten Network. Penn State's ranked 11th in the college football playoffs. We should have an instant reaction, I would assume. I know we didn't do one last week. I would assume we'll have one. I will be covering a football game at 1:00 on Saturday. Should be over by about 3, so I should be home by no later than the end of the first quarter or halftime. But I'll have it on the radio and stuff, so should be all right.
You're actually going to see a big-time Penn State football commit in action.
I sure
am.
That's
something we can talk about on the next podcast.
I'm going to try really hard to get an interview with him on Saturday. Also, they have another lineman today who just got offered from Cincinnati and Syracuse, so maybe he'll end up going the Big Ten route as well. For those who don't know, we're talking about Wyomissing High School here in Central PA. They play our alma mater, West Perry. That's where I work and teach and all that stuff. So They play in the district championship game on Saturday, so I'll be covering that for the paper. Pretty cool, pretty exciting. Nothing to do with Penn State football, but other than they do have a commit on Wyomissing, so I guess it kind of relates. He is not the guest picker that I'm trying to line up, by the way. Okay, because I haven't told you about this, and I don't want to jinx it, so I didn't know if maybe you were thinking.
No,
I had to figure out who it was, but we'll see if we can get him. Let's see what happens. So, anything else, Zach?
That's all I got.
All right, we appreciate everybody watching. As we always say, make sure you like and comment. Thanks, Jordan, for his service. He's doing some really tough labor over there right now. It doesn't seem like it is, but I know he is. So I think that'll wrap it up. Have a great day, and we'll see you after Penn State destroys Rutgers.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.